Students, in the last session we have discussed about the significant figures, the scientific notation, how actually they are going to be added, subtracted and multiplied and also divided. So today we will see about the fundamental laws related to chemistry. Whenever the two elements combined, they form a product. So how actually it is going to be formed, what are the parameters which were involved during the reactions, all the details were explained in some laws which we call it as fundamental laws of chemistry. So first we will see about the laws of chemical combinations. The combination of elements to form compound is governed by these following 5 basic laws that we call it as basic laws. The first one is law of conservation of mass. Second law of definite proportions, which is also called as law of definite composition. Then the third law is called as law of multiple proportions, and the fourth law is called as Gay-Lussac law of gaseous volumes. Then Avogadro's law. So first law of conservation of mass. Before going to that, one more law is there that we call it as law of reciprocal proportions, which is not included in the syllabus, but later on we'll see some part of that. Now first we'll concentrate on law of conservation of mass. According to this law was actually explained or put forth by Antony Lavoisier in 1789. What the law states? The law states that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. That means mass of the reactant and mass of the product will be remained same. There is no change in the mass point of view. Mass elements, that means the elements or the atoms may reorganize, may recombine with another elements, but their mass will be remained same. That is what the law of conservation of mass. So actually this law was proved by a scientist called as Landlot. Okay, so that was proved by Landolt. Okay, so it is Landolt, Landolt. And what he made, actually has taken silver nitrate mixed with sodium chloride, and after the reaction, as you know already, AgCl plus NaNO3 is formed. That is AgNO3 plus NaCl give rise to AgCl plus what about the another one, NaNO3. So what he observed is mass of the reactant will become equals to mass of product. Mass of reactant is equals to mass of product. That means there is no change in the mass point of view. So therefore this law was actually accepted. Okay, next. Next, the law of definite proportions, law of definite composition. It is also called as law of definite composition. So law of definite proportions, what this law states? Actually this law was proposed by or given by a French chemist called Joseph Proust. And what he told or what he stated that a given compound always contains exactly the same proportion of elements by weight. What he told, a given compound always contain exactly the same proportion of elements by weight. Now we'll illustrate with this some example. Actually, if you take the percentage of copper and carbon and oxygen in the formation of copper carbonate, there the natural sample means which is obtained from natural resources, there the percentage of copper is 51.35, percentage of carbon is 9.74 and percentage of oxygen was 38.91. The same copper carbonate is prepared in the laboratory, that we call it as a synthetic sample. That synthetic sample also contain the same proportions of these elements, copper 51.35, carbon 9.74, oxygen 31.91. So this clearly indicates that whatever may be the source, whatever may be the way, whatever may be the root, whenever that compound is formed, whenever that compound is going to be present, that compound in which the elements which were present in that compound will always contain same proportions. Another example I am going to state here is, so here what he told, irrespective of the source, a given compound always contain the same elements combined together in the same proportions by mass. So it is sometimes also referred as law of definite composition. Now I will go with one more example that illustrate about the law of definite proportions. What is that? So here I will take carbon, C plus O2 give rise to CO2. Here direct combustion of carbon in presence of air or oxygen. So here carbon dioxide is formed. Again I will take one more source, CaCO3, calcium carbonate. When decomposed, you are getting calcium oxide plus CO2. Here also you are getting CO2. Then I will go with carbonates or bicarbonates. Whenever they are treated with acid, there you are getting CO2. That means direct combustion of carbon also gives carbon dioxide. Calcium carbonate, look here. Here the source of carbon dioxide is a different one. First direct combustion of carbon, second one is calcium carbonate is taken. In the third example we have taken the carbonates or bicarbonates. In all these cases the product is carbon dioxide, maybe a byproduct or a main product. But whenever the carbon dioxide is formed, the ratio should be 12:32. 12:32, or you can say 3:8 by weight. So that is what we call it as law of definite proportions or constant proportions. That means whatever may be the source, whenever that compound formed, that compound always contains the elements which were in the same proportions or constant proportions. So that is about the second law called as law of constant proportions. Okay, now we'll see the third law. We'll see about the third law, that is law of multiple proportions. What this law states? This law was actually proposed by Dalton in 1803. What he told or what he stated that if two elements can combine to form more than one compound, the masses of one element that combines with a fixed mass of the other element are in the ratio of small whole numbers. What he stated, if two elements can combine to form more than one compound, for example, If I take the example of hydrogen combines with oxygen to form two compounds, namely water and hydrogen peroxide. So if I take hydrogen as 2 gram, oxygen as 16 gram to form 18 gram of water. Then the same hydrogen combined with oxygen to form hydrogen peroxide. Here I'll take hydrogen peroxide as H2O2 and water as H2O. Okay, now in the first 2 gram hydrogen is required for 16 gram of oxygen to form 18 gram of water. In the second example, the same hydrogen combined with oxygen to form hydrogen peroxide, where 2 gram of hydrogen requires 32 gram of oxygen to form 34 gram of hydrogen peroxide. Now what this illustrates, here the same elements will give more than one product. One is water, another one is hydrogen peroxide. Then what he told, in that one element that combines with fixed mass of the other element. So here if you look at the hydrogen point of view, it is 2 gram, that is fixed, and here the oxygen point of view, here it is 16 and here it is 32. That means if I take oxygen point of view, it is 1:2 ratio, isn't it? So that means what he told, one element is remained fixed mass and another element are in the ratios of small whole numbers. Now here the masses of oxygen, that is 16 and 32 gram, which combined with hydrogen, that is 2 gram, bear a simple ratio, that is 16:32, or you can say 1:2 ratio. So that is what we call it as law of multiple proportions. So what actually the law of multiple proportion says, whenever the two elements can combine, if they want to give more than one product at that time, one element will be remained with fixed mass, another element are in the ratio of small whole numbers. I'll take one more example. For example, if you take nitrogen, N2 plus O2. So here actually nitrogen plus oxygen gives different products. They are N2O, NO, N2O3, N2O4, N2O5. The same two elements, nitrogen and oxygen, will give all these, and here you can see the nitrogen composition will be remained same. You just go through that. Nitrogen composition or the nitrogen percentage is remained same, but oxygen percentage will be in the ratio of 1:2. Okay, so I'll take out that. Okay, so here you can see the nitrogen percentage or the nitrogen composition or the nitrogen mass is remained same, but oxygen mass are in the ratio of 1:2, 3, 4, 5, like that. So that means here it is 1, in case of nitric oxide it was 2, nitrogen trioxide 3, because you just go with, here it is 16 nitrous oxide, it is nitrous oxide, the second one is nitric oxide, third one is nitrogen trioxide, fourth one is nitrogen tetroxide, and the fifth one is nitrogen pentoxide. Here the nitrogen composition is remained the same, nitrogen mass is remained same, but oxygen mass is going to be increased with 1:2 ratio, 2:3, 3:4, 4:5. So that is about the another important point called law of multiple proportion. One more good example. Okay, next we'll see about the fourth law, that is Gay-Lussac law of gaseous volumes. What he says, let us see. This law was given by Gay-Lussac. Already you know, that is in the statement also it is there, Gay-Lussac's law. So in the 1808, now what he observed or what he want to tell, whenever the two gases combined are produced, that means during the reaction when gases are combined or the product may be the gas in a chemical reaction, they do so in a simple ratio by volume, provided all gases are at the same temperature and pressure. That means we know that chemistry is associated with reactions, and here there are different reactions. The reactions in which solids are included, solutions are included, gases are included. But whenever the gases are going to be react with one another, at that time they always reacts in terms of volumes. They never reacts in terms of mass. They always interact with one another in the form of volumes. And the condition should be all these gases are at the same temperature and pressure. So that is about the importance of this law. Okay, so here we'll have the one example. If you take formation of water, if you take the formation of water, 100 ml of hydrogen combined with 50 ml of oxygen to give 100 ml of water vapor. So I'll write that here H2 plus, I'll write half O2 give rise to H2O. Now here it is one volume, here it is half volume, here it is one volume. That means what if I take 100 ml of hydrogen, then oxygen should be required half of that means 50 ml, and water is also 1. So therefore here when you take 100 ml of hydrogen, when it is mixed with half or that is 50 ml of oxygen, you are getting 100 ml of water. 100 ml of water. So that means the volume of hydrogen and oxygen which combined bear a simple ratio of 2:1 or 1:half. So that is about the Gay-Lussac law. So Gay-Lussac law, one more example will quote here. So I'll take out this. So here the Gay-Lussac discovery of integer ratio in volume relationship is actually law of definite proportions by volume. That means already this law is very much correlated. This law is very much correlated with what? Definite proportions. Only there we are discussing about the mass, but here we are discussing about the volume. That's all. So that is, it is nothing but a modified version of law of definite proportions with respect to volume. That's all. So that is about the another important point. Now we'll see one more example. I'll go with one more example. If you take N2 plus 3H2 give rise to 2NH3. Then what is the ratio? 1:3:2. That means if you take 1 ml of nitrogen, 3 ml of hydrogen, then you are getting 2 ml of ammonia vapors, or you can say 100 ml, 300 ml, and then you are getting 200 ml. That means the ratio will be 1:3:2. So that is one more example. And what is the condition? The products, if they were in the gaseous state, and the reactants which are also in the gaseous state should be maintained at the same temperature and pressure. So that is about the Gay-Lussac law of gaseous volumes. So this kind of explanation, if I take one volume and this is 3 volumes and this is 2 volumes, in terms of ml you can say 1 ml, 3 ml and 2 ml. So like that, whenever the gas is going to react, they always react in the form or in terms of volumes. Okay, so that is about the Gay-Lussac law of gaseous volumes. Next, Avogadro's law, that is the fifth law. What about the Avogadro's law states? Actually, he proposed this law in the year 1811. What he told, equal volumes of all the gases at the same temperature and pressure should contain equal number of molecules. That means if the same temperature and pressure should be maintained, then the volumes of the different gases maintains the same numbers. For example, if you take the example of the same example, that is what we quoted earlier, that is hydrogen and oxygen to produce water, we can see that, or we see that 2 volumes of hydrogen combined with 1 volume of oxygen to give 2 volumes of water without leaving any unreacted oxygen. That means already I explained this reaction. Now I will show you with diagrammatic presentation. So here I have taken 1 volume of hydrogen. Look at there. How many hydrogen molecules are there in the box? 5, isn't it? And again I have taken 1 volume of oxygen, it should be. Yes, actually 2 volumes, isn't it? So 2 volumes of hydrogen atoms were taken. So here the point is 2 volumes of hydrogen, this is 1 volume, and 2 volumes means 1 volume of hydrogen plus 1 volume of hydrogen gives you 2 volumes of hydrogen made to react with 1 volume of oxygen. So totally how many hydrogen molecules are there? 5 plus 5, 10. And 1 volume of oxygen, that is 5 molecules of oxygen are there, isn't it? Then the product will contain what? 2 volumes of water vapor. So that is what he told, that is under same condition of temperature and pressure, equal volumes of all gases contain equal number of molecules. That I can say V is directly proportional to N. Volume is directly proportional to what? Number of molecules. So that is about the Avogadro's law. Next comes, after these basic laws, Dalton proposed an atomic theory, which is the first fundamental theory related to this atomic concept. Before that, atoms point of view, no explanation was there. So Dalton was the pioneer, or you can say the first person who explained about the atoms. What he told, the origin of the idea that matter is composed of small indivisible particles called atomio. It is also called as atomos. Atomos means indivisible, that cannot be further divided. So in 1808, Dalton published a new system of chemical philosophy. A book was there, and there he proposed, or he explained what actually atoms are. The first postulate says all the matter consists of indivisible atoms. All matter, whatever may be the state, whatever may be the type, all these type of matter mainly consist of indivisible atoms. That means small tiny particles which cannot be further divided. Second, all these atoms of a given element have identical properties, including identical mass, then identical shape and structure, everything will be same, and atoms of different elements having different in mass. That means, for example, the mass of carbon is totally different from that of the mass of nitrogen. And when you take the nitrogen, in the nitrogen all these atoms are having same mass, same shape, same structure, everything is same. But nitrogen atom is totally different from that of copper atoms. That is what he told in the second postulate. Third postulate, here compounds are formed when two atoms or more than two atoms of different elements in a fixed ratio. That means whenever the compound is going to be formed, at that time these atoms will combined with a fixed ratio. For example, you can see the law of definite proportions. So that is about the third postulate proposed or given by the Dalton. Then the fourth postulate says that chemical reactions involves reorganization of atoms. That means whenever the chemical reaction going to takes place, what actually happens? Nothing change in the mass, only the organization of the atom will be changed. For example, if you take H2, in which hydrogen bonded with hydrogen plus oxygen, O bonded with oxygen. In the case of water, H2O, here I will write. So here H plus O give rise to H2O. Now you can see here, that is whenever the reaction going to takes place, the reorganization of atoms will be there. Here hydrogen is bonded with hydrogen, oxygen is bonded with oxygen, but after the reaction oxygen is in between the hydrogens. So reorganization of atoms will be going to take place, but atoms will not be destroyed or not be created. So that is about the fourth postulate. So these are the different postulates of Dalton's atomic theory. What he says, matter consists of indivisible atoms, that means small tiny particles which cannot be further divided. Second, all atoms of a given element have identical properties, that means same properties. For example, if you take the copper atoms, in which all the copper atoms shows the same mass, same structure, same kind of physical and same kind of chemical properties. But at the same time, what he pointed out, atoms of different elements differ in the mass. That means atomic mass or the mass of copper is totally different from that of mass of nitrogen or hydrogen or oxygen, whatever it may be. So that means every atom, every matter, or you can say every element has its own identity. Then the third postulate, he says, whenever the compound is going to be formed, these atoms always combined in a fixed ratio. And the fourth, chemical reactions are nothing but reorganization of the atoms, that's all. There the atoms neither created nor destroyed, only their arrangement, the mode of attachment will be different. So that is about the fourth postulate. Now this is all about the Dalton's atomic theory. Next, what are the merits associated with Dalton's law? First, he explained in a better way all the laws of chemical combination. You can take the law of conservation of mass, you can take the law of definite proportions, law of multiple proportions, All these laws were clearly explained by Dalton. You just go through the postulates. You can see the postulates. There you will find what the merits of or the explanation of the what these laws. So that is, you can see the postulate 1 to 4. There you can see law of conservation of mass. If you just go through the postulate number 2, there you will find law of definite proportions. And if you go with the postulate 3, that explains about the multiple proportions. So that means all the laws were clearly explained by John Dalton. So that is the main merit associated with Dalton's atomic theory. Then we'll have the demerits, that is the limitations. Merits means the one that can be explained. Demerits means the one that cannot be explained by the theory or fails to explain the theory. Demerits is also called as limitations. The first one, it could not explain the law of gaseous volumes. So actually, whatever the explanation given by the Dalton are associated with mass. That means whenever the reaction going to take place, there the mass is involved. But in the gaseous reactions, instead of mass, volumes are involved. Why it is so? That he could not explain. That is the first demerit of this theory. Second, he could not provide the reason for combining of atoms. That means, what is the necessity of nitrogen made to react with oxygen to form nitric oxide or nitrogen dioxide? Or why hydrogen and oxygen combine to form water? What is the reason behind these reactions? He could not explain. So that is the second demerit. Third, he could not give a clear distinction between atoms and molecules. That means he totally fails to distinguish between atoms and molecules. He told in water also water atoms are there, but it is not true. Atoms and molecules are having distinct differentiation. That means we can easily differentiate them from one another. So that means he fails to give the distinction or the differences between the atoms and the molecules. So that is one more demerit associated with Dalton's theory. And the next one is, it fails to explain why the atoms of different elements different in mass and valency. That means when we are talking about the atom, what we are expecting? We are expecting that they have the same mass, but they are having different masses. What may be the reason? Later on it is revealed actually, due to presence of neutrons, different number of neutrons and protons, the mass will be differ. So that is atomic number will be explained later on. Atomic mass is explained clearly in the later concepts. So but at that time he totally fails why the different atoms are having difference in the mass. And also whenever the two elements combine and produces more than one product, at that time the valency will be changed. For example, if you take H2O, here the valency or the oxidation state of oxygen is -2, but if you take H2O2, here it is -1. So why such type of valencies will be changed, or what is the necessity, or what is the criteria behind that, or what are the reasons behind that to change its valency or oxidation state? That phenomena he could not explain. So that was explained later. Now we'll concentrate on the next concept called as atomic and molecular masses. So actually when we are looking the atoms and the molecules, they are very, 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 very small. You cannot see them with naked eyes. Even microscopic level also little bit difficult to see and weigh them. So therefore here no doubt atoms are the fundamental particles of a matter, but at the same time it is a necessity to know about their masses. So in that connection, in that direction, several scientists have worked on that and put forwarded different concepts. Now what is that? Let us see. So here first we'll concentrate on atomic mass. So here as I told, the atomic mass or the mass of an atom is actually very small, because atoms are extremely smaller in nature, So then in the 19th century, scientists could determine the mass of one atom relative to another by experimental means. That means the first step towards determining the atomic mass is what? Relating with or comparing with another element or another atom. As has been mentioned earlier, that is first step in this connection, hydrogen was selected. Hydrogen was selected as a standard to measure the atomic mass of different elements or different atoms. So here hydrogen, being the lightest element, was arbitrarily assigned a mass of 1. At that time without any units was there. So and other elements were assigned masses relative to it. So here hydrogen is taken as a standard to assign, to give the masses of other atoms, but hydrogen was taken out. What is the reason behind it? Because hydrogen is not reacting with many of the elements, many of the atoms. So therefore hydrogen taking as a standard was ruled out or is taken out because of this drawback. Then immediately oxygen was taken. That means it was replaced by oxygen. So oxygen was selected to assign the relative atomic masses of other elements, but the drawback of oxygen is it contains 3 isotopes. So because of that reason oxygen was also taken out. Present system of atomic mass is based on carbon 12, isotope of carbon, that is carbon 12 as the standard. Now what is that? In this system carbon 12 is assigned a mass of exactly 12 atomic mass unit, that we call it as AMU, and masses of all other atoms are given relative to this standard. So that means nowadays we are taking carbon 12 as a standard. So carbon 12, no doubt carbon also contain isotopes, but their percentage of abundance in that will be very less. So therefore carbon 12 is taken as a standard. Next, here you can see one atomic mass unit is defined as, actually what is atomic mass unit? It is defined as a mass exactly equal to 1/12 of the mass of one carbon 12 atom. One atomic mass unit is what? Exactly equal to 1/12 of the mass of one carbon atom. If I take this as a carbon atom, now here I will take 1/12 portion, like that you can divide into several parts. So here I will take 1/12 of the mass of one carbon 12 atom. So that means one atomic mass unit is equals to 1.66056 into 10 to the power of minus 24 gram. 1/12 mass of carbon is considered as how much? 1.66056 into 10 to the power of minus 24 gram. Then we know that mass of an atom of hydrogen is also 1.6736 into 10 to the power of minus 24 gram. So then in terms of atomic mass unit, the mass of hydrogen atom will be 1.6736 into 10 to the power of minus 24 divided by 1.66056 into 10 to the power of minus 24. So that is mass of hydrogen atom divided by mass of one atomic mass unit, that is 1/12 of the mass of carbon 12 isotope. Then we are getting 1.0078 or approximately it is 1.0080 atomic mass unit. So nowadays atomic mass unit is replaced by unified mass. That means now I will tell you, I'll go with the definition. What actually this says? So here one atomic mass unit is equals to what? 1/12 of the mass of one carbon 12 atom, and one atomic mass unit of hydrogen is 1.0080. In other terms I can say that one atom of hydrogen is 1 times heavier than, concentrate the words, one atom of hydrogen is 1 times heavier than 1/12 part by mass of carbon 12 isotope. Okay, now we'll see one more example. So one more example before going to this average atomic mass. If the atomic mass of oxygen is 16, what it means? So here it means that one atom of oxygen is 16 times heavier than that of 1/12 part by mass of carbon 12 isotope. Then we'll see about average atomic mass. So here why average atomic mass is required? Because almost all naturally occurring elements are associated with more than one isotopes. We know that isotopes are having same atomic number but different mass numbers. So here almost all naturally occurring elements are associated with or exist as more than one isotope. For example, when we take the isotopes, particularly the carbon, if you take the example of carbon, so when we take into account the existence of these isotopes and their relative abundance, that is percentage occurrence, the average atomic mass of that element can be computed or calculated. If you take the example of carbon, so actually carbon, it was C12, C13 and C14. So you can see the concentration, that is relative abundance in the percentage along with its atomic mass. So C12 12, C13 13.00335, whereas C14 14.00317. At the same time you can see their relative abundance. So C12 98.8, whereas C13 1.108, whereas C14 you can say 2 into 10 to the power of minus 10. That means very much negligible. So based on this data we can calculate average atomic mass of carbon, that is 0.98892 into 12 plus 0.01108 into 13.00335 plus 2 into 10 to the power of minus 10 into 14.00317, that gives you 12.011. That means atomic mass of carbon can be taken as 12. Atomic mass of carbon is taken as 12. So that means, what is the importance of average atomic mass? Here as such, whenever we take any element, for example, if you take the chlorine also exists in the form of Cl35 and Cl37. If you take hydrogen, there also you are finding 3 isotopes. So based on their percentage of isotopes, it is necessary to know about their average atomic mass, because isotopes also contributes some mass to the atoms. So therefore average atomic mass will be the actually calculated part of the atomic mass of an element. If you take any example, for example, you can take the aluminium, it was 27. If you take argon, it was 39.94. If you take iodine, that is 126. And if you take iron, 55.8. While calculating, or for calculation we are taking as a round of 256 and so on, but basically based on their isotopes and their relative abundance, percentage occurrence, we are calculating the average of the atomic masses. Okay, now we'll see about the molecular mass. After this atomic mass and average atomic mass, we'll concentrate on molecular mass. So molecular mass is the sum of atomic masses of the elements present in a molecule. So what actually molecular mass? Molecular mass is the sum of atomic masses. For example, if you take, it is obtained by multiplying the atomic mass of each element by the number of its atom and adding them together. How actually it is going to be obtained? It is obtained by multiplying the atomic mass of each element by the number of its atom in that compound and adding them together. One will have the example, the molecular mass of methane. Molecular mass of methane. So actually methane, if you take, it is CH4, isn't it? So CH4 here, one carbon atom and having 4 hydrogen atoms. We know that carbon is 12.011, only one carbon atom is there, plus 4 hydrogen atoms are there, each hydrogen atom is having 1.008. So totally how much it was? 16.043 unified mass. So we can take it as 16. One more example we can have, molecular mass of water, you can say. So here hydrogen are 2 atoms and oxygen is 1. So 2 into atomic mass of hydrogen plus 1 into atomic mass of oxygen. So that gives you 2 into 1.008 unified mass plus oxygen is 16 into 1. So therefore it gives 18.02 unified mass. So this is actually molecular mass. In terms of carbon 12, how we can explain this? I'll explain, concentrate here. So here, if I take with respect to carbon 12 isotope, then I can define the molecular mass in this way. What is that? If I take the example of water, what is the molecular mass of water? 18. So that means one molecule of water is 18 times heavier than that of 1/12 part by mass of carbon 12 isotope. Or I can take the example of methane. One molecule of methane is 16 times heavier than 1/12 part by mass of carbon 12 isotope. So that is how we are going to calculate. So molecular mass calculation is very simple. You just add the atomic weights of different elements which were involved in that product along with their numbers. So addition of the atomic weights, gives you molecular mass. Then the formula mass, what actually the formula mass says, because there are some solids, for example you can take sodium chloride, copper sulfate. So these exist in the form of solids. So here as such, whenever we are talking about the solids, here the molecules are tightly bonded with one another. That means here they do not contain discrete molecules. So in such compounds, the positive and the negative ions are arranged in three-dimensional structure. So therefore, for such compounds, instead of molecular mass, we are calling it as formula mass. But way of calculation is again same. We are taking the atomic masses only, but we are calling instead of molecular mass formula mass. So for example, if you can take the example of sodium chloride. So here atomic mass of sodium plus atomic mass of chlorine. We know that sodium atomic mass is 23 and chlorine atomic mass is 35.5, that gives you 58.5 unified mass. So that means formula mass is meant for ionic solids. Then the last concept called mole concept and molar mass. Actually in SI system, mole was introduced as a seventh basic fundamental quantity for amount of substance. Symbol is MOL. Actually what is mole? It is defined as the amount of substance that contains the number of particles or the entities which were there in the 12 gram of carbon, 12 isotope. So that means 1 mole of the substance is defined as the number of particles or entities which were there in the 12 gram of carbon 12 isotope. For example, the mass of carbon 12 is the mass of carbon 12 atom was determined by mass spectrometer and found to be equals to 1.992648 into 10 to the power of minus 23. Knowing that 1 mole of carbon weighs 12 gram, the number of atoms in it is equals to. So based on this calculation, you can see 6.022137 into 10 to the power of 23 atoms. That means 1 mole of substance will contain 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 species. It may be atoms or molecules or ions or electrons. So that means I can say this 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 is called as Avogadro number. This number is called as Avogadro number. So Avogadro number and mole concept, they are the different sides of the same coin. If you want to define mole, there you are taking the help of Avogadro number. Now I can define 1 mole of the substance which contain 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 entities. Or I can say Avogadro number. It is the number of particles present in 1 mole of a substance. So I can say now 1 mole of hydrogen atom contain 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 atoms. Or I can say the water 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 water molecules. So here the important point is, if you are mentioning the atom, you should mention the atoms. If you are taking the molecules, then molecule should be mentioned. So that is sodium chloride, you can take 6.022. That means whatever may be the substance, 1 mole always contain 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23 particles. So that is about the mole and Avogadro number. Then the last point is about the molar mass. So the mass of 1 mole substance in terms of gram is called as molar mass. So 58 gram, if I take for sodium chloride, then I can say 58 gram is the molar mass of sodium chloride. So molar mass of water is 18.02 gram per mole. Molar mass of sodium chloride is 58.5 gram per mole. That means if the molecular mass is expressed in terms of gram per mole, then it is called as molar mass. So that is all about the point. So here with this I conclude today's class, and in the next session we'll see about other part of the chemistry, that is first topic. Okay, thank you.